I've lived in a small town in Pennsylvania my whole life, and honestly, nothing interesting ever really happens here. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and the streets become completely quiet once the sun starts to set. Last October, though, something happened that I still can't explain. Even now, thinking about it makes me uneasy. It was a Saturday evening around 5 o'clock when the sun was slowly dropping behind the trees. I decided to go for my usual run down Maple Street, a long road near my house that eventually leads toward a small forest trail. I like running there because it's peaceful, and usually there's nobody around. That evening, however, the moment I stepped outside, I immediately noticed something strange. The entire street was covered in thick fog. It wasn't the normal kind either. It was so dense that the houses across the street looked blurry, almost like someone had smeared the world with gray paint. I stood there for a moment staring down the road, thinking about how unusual it looked. But eventually, I brushed it off and started jogging like I normally do. The neighborhood was completely silent. No cars passed by, no people were outside, and not even dogs were barking. The only sound was the steady rhythm of my shoes hitting the pavement. After about 5 minutes of running, I noticed something through the fog ahead of me. At first, it was just a dark shape standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down slightly, trying to focus on it. It looked like a person standing about 50 yards away. I assumed it was probably another jogger or someone taking a walk in the evening fog. But the closer I got, the stranger it seemed. The person wasn't moving at all. They were just standing there in the center of the street facing directly toward me. Their arms were hanging straight down at their sides in a stiff and unnatural way. I eventually stopped running and called out to them, but there was no response. The figure didn't react in any way. It didn't move, it didn't turn its head. It simply stood there, staring in my direction. Something about the situation suddenly made me feel very uncomfortable. A cold feeling settled in my stomach, and I decided it would probably be smarter to turn around and head back home. As I turned around to leave, I glanced back over my shoulder one last time, and that's when my heart nearly stopped. The figure was closer, much closer than before. Just seconds earlier, it had been about 50 yards away, but now it looked maybe 20 yards away. The problem was that I hadn't heard any footsteps behind me. I hadn't heard anything moving at all. That's when panic started to kick in. I turned forward and began running as fast as I could. My heart was pounding loudly in my chest, and the thick fog made everything feel strange, almost like the street around me had become smaller and tighter. After running for about half a minute, curiosity got the better of me, and I looked back again. The figure was still there, but now it was walking slowly toward me. The way it moved didn't look normal. Its steps were stiff and jerky, almost like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. That was enough for me. I ran faster than I ever had before until I finally reached my house. Completely out of breath, I rushed inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it immediately. Then I walked to the front window and looked outside. The fog had gotten even thicker by then. At first, I didn't see anything at all. But after a few seconds, a dark shape slowly appeared in the distance. It was standing at the end of my driveway, perfectly still, facing my house like it was watching me. I don't know how long it stood there, but eventually the fog became so dense that the shape disappeared completely. The next morning when I woke up, the fog was gone, and everything outside looked normal again. But when I stepped outside, I noticed something in my driveway that made my stomach drop. There were footprints leading from the street all the way up to my front door. Long, narrow footprints. And then, they stopped, right outside the door. When I transferred to Westbrook High School, I immediately noticed that people talked about the building differently than any other school I had been to. Most schools have rumors about strict teachers or weird rules, but Westbrook had something else entirely. Students whispered about strange things happening after dark, lockers slamming shut on their own, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and shadows moving in places where nobody should have been. At first, I thought it was just typical school gossip meant to scare new students like me. Every school has stories like that, and most of the time they turn out to be nothing more than imagination and boredom. Still, there was something about the way people talked about Westbrook that made the stories feel more serious than usual. The building itself looked old compared to the rest of the town. The bricks were faded and cracked in places, and the tall windows always looked slightly dusty, even when the sun was shining brightly outside. During the day, it didn't seem too bad, but once the afternoon classes ended, the atmosphere inside the school started to change. The hallways became quieter, the lights seemed dimmer, and every sound echoed much louder than it should have. About 2 weeks after I started there, I had to stay late after school to finish a history project. My partner, Daniel, had basketball practice that afternoon, so he told me to finish the research, and he'd help present it the next day. I didn't mind staying late. I actually thought it would be easier to work without the usual noise of students everywhere. By the time the last bell rang and most people left, the school felt completely different. The long hallways were empty, and the silence felt almost unnatural. Occasionally, I could hear a teacher closing a classroom door somewhere far away. But other than that, the building was quiet. I sat in the library for about an hour working on the project. Eventually, I realized it was getting pretty late, so I packed my bag and started walking toward the front entrance. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something strange right away. One of the lockers down the hall slammed shut. Loudly. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. I froze for a moment and looked around, expecting to see someone else still there. Maybe another student grabbing their books before leaving. But the hallway was empty. Every locker was closed, and there wasn't a single person in sight. I tried to ignore it and kept walking. But then I heard something else. Footsteps. They were slow and uneven, almost like someone was walking carefully behind me. I stopped walking immediately and turned around, expecting to see someone coming down the hallway. There was nobody there. The hallway stretched behind me, empty and silent. For a moment, I thought maybe the sound had come from another floor, or maybe the building had just made some weird noise. Old buildings do that sometimes. Pipes move, floors creak, and sounds travel through the walls. Still, the feeling that someone was nearby wouldn't go away. I continued toward the exit, walking a little faster this time. The hallway lights flickered slightly as I passed under them, which made the entire place feel even creepier. Just as I turned the corner toward the staircase, I heard another noise. This time, it sounded like something dragging across the floor. Slow, heavy. I stopped again and looked back down the hallway. At first, I didn't see anything. Then something moved near the lockers. It was just a shadow, barely visible in the dim light. But it definitely moved. My heart started beating faster as I tried to focus on what I was looking at. The shadow looked almost like the shape of a person standing near the lockers, but there was something wrong with it. It didn't move like a normal person. It twitched slightly, jerking in small, unnatural movements. That was enough for me. I turned around and started walking quickly toward the staircase. I wasn't running yet, but I definitely didn't want to stay in that hallway any longer than I had to. As I reached the stairs, I heard the dragging sound again, but this time it was closer. Much closer. I turned around one more time, and that's when I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, standing near the lockers, there was a figure. It was tall and thin, and the dim light made it difficult to see clearly, but I could tell it was facing directly toward me. The strangest part was the way it stood. Its arms hung straight down, stiff and unnatural, and its head was tilted slightly to the side. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then the hallway light above it flickered. When the light came back on, the figure was closer. My stomach dropped instantly. I didn't see it move. I didn't hear footsteps. It was just suddenly closer than before. That's when I finally ran. I rushed down the stairs as fast as I could, nearly tripping in the process. My footsteps echoed loudly through the stairwell, and the sound made my panic even worse. When I reached the bottom floor, I ran straight toward the front entrance. The glass doors were just ahead of me. But as I slowed down to push them open, something caught my attention. A reflection. In the glass of the door, behind me. Slowly turning around, I looked down the hallway one last time. The figure was standing there again, at the end of the corridor, watching. It didn't chase me. It didn't move. It just stood there in the dim hallway light, completely still. I pushed the door open and ran outside into the cold evening air. I didn't stop running until I reached the parking lot across the street. When I finally looked back at the school building, everything looked completely normal. The lights were still on inside, and the hallways looked empty. But even now, months later, I still think about what I saw that night. And the strangest part is something I learned the next day. When I told another student about what happened, he looked at me with a strange expression and said something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, years ago, a janitor died in that exact hallway after falling down the stairs late at night. Some students say that if you stay in the school after dark, sometimes you can still hear him walking through the halls, dragging one leg behind him